Phyllis.
Good morning.
Phyllis Kreiner.
That's correct.
And thank you for your openness and willingness to share your story with us. I'd like to have you begin, and of course you can take any direction which you want, but at least to begin, let's hear about your beginnings, where you grew up, your schooling, your siblings, your family, whatever you'd like us to know about yourself.
All right. Well, I'm going to start with my mother and dad because that's where my history started.
Good. Mm-hmm.
They both came from North Branch, Michigan, and they lived probably about a mile or two from each other. And they were married and soon started to have a family. And they first lived next to the church, St. Mary's in Burnside. That's out in the country, yes. And it's right across from the cemetery where my family members started that, and that's where all my family members are, and many aunts and uncles, grandparents are buried there. And they lived next to the church, and my dad was very good at getting to know the priests in the parishes. Mm-hmm. And because we lived so close there, he first became a very good friend of Father McGinnis. And Father McGinnis was the priest that baptized myself and my twin brother. Now, and Father McGinnis, I'm going to jump ahead here a little bit. When I entered, I was down at the cemetery. We were looking around, and the sister that was with us told us about the priests that were buried around the altar, and that's where Father McGinnis is buried.
Oh my. Mm-hmm.
He became a very close friend to the nuns when he was in some small place around here. And so anyway, my mother and dad raised 9 children, and I am at the bottom. I have a sister and a brother mm-hmm. that was younger than myself and my twin brother. And the other ones, were older. We had 4 boys and 5 girls. Mm-hmm. And as we grew up as children, we were taught 3 things. One was to work hard, because we lived on a farm, mm-hmm. and to work hard, to play hard, and to pray hard. Mm-hmm. And those 3 things really followed all of us and made a great impression on us. And it never stopped from the time the first ones were born and ready to do those things. It just fell right down the line with us. And I had 5 sisters, 4 sisters. I was the 5th. And my oldest sister, Margie, when she graduated from high school, she wanted to enter the service. And that was unheard of mm-hmm. way back. It was in 42 that we were still mm-hmm. at war. And my mother and dad were very kind of upset that that's what she would want to do. But she was determined, and they had to sign for her because she was only 17. And little by little, she, went around the house crying about it because they wouldn't sign for her. Then finally, they gave in and signed for her, and she went to the Air Force. And then I just remember that to be a very important thing that happened as a young girl, because I thought she was as pretty as any movie star. Mm. And I always just thought she was wonderful. And she lived to be 90-some. and she died here just about 2 years ago. And of course, she had a military service, which we had never experienced in our family. So that's one thing I remember about one of them. My other,
You call her Margie. That's Margaret, right?
no, that's
it's not.
Margie.
Okay.
Margaret, the one that you
Yeah,
knew so
okay.
well, really was named Anna.
Okay.
I think her name was Margaret Anna. She was named after her two grandmothers, and we always called her Anna. I got used to calling her Margaret when I lived with her, and she was working and I was working outside of our home after I had graduated. And all her friends called her Margaret because she I think she preferred it. But yes, that's, you caught me on that one. Anyway, she became she was in the,
Margie or
no, this is Margaret.
Margaret,
This is-
okay,
yeah,
yeah.
Anna. She worked with the airlines for 30 years, I believe. My brothers all worked on the construction of the poles being set along the roads. You know, they were linemen and things like that. All four of them, well, except my twin brother. I'll tell you why that happened. But anyway, so that's pretty much what most of them did. And so the thing that happened to us as a family when I was a junior and with my twin brother, and he got ill in the summer, and he died about 9 months later. And so that was, so I started my senior year without him because he was still sick. And that was, it was hard to know how you handled death.
Right.
I mean, that's how I felt from, you know. And so it was 2 years later when I announced to my mother that I was thinking about becoming a religious. And
Was there someone that you looked up to that was a sister that prompted
well, I
that?
did have an aunt in our congregation. Marie Bernadette
Okay.
was her name. And I probably saw her a couple times during my lifetime. And I know that my older sisters and my cousins that were their age talked about the fact that when they graduated from high school, she, Marie Bernadette, asked all of them, one by one, if they would consider that. And I think by the time I came along, she probably had gotten discouraged. And so I never talked to her about it. So I did have the Adrian Dominicans for when I made First Communion. They came up to another parish in the country there, and we went for 2 weeks to get ready for First Communion.
Okay.
And that's the only connection I had with the Adrian Dominicans. In our parish during the year, we had the IHMs that came.
Okay.
And, but I never knew any of them other than that they taught me, you know, for a few years. I really think...
Except your aunt.
Except my
Yeah.
aunt. But I really can't say that she had a
Right.
big role in that. I do think my vocation probably came from the way my mother and dad raised us. And I can remember when my twin brother died, we were in 11th grade at that time. And I remember thinking, this is what I have been thinking about for a long time. And I should do something about it quickly, because how do I know that I'm going to live very long. That's how I thought about
Right.
that. And I thought I need to do something about this and not wait a long time. So I worked for a couple years. And I think I did that because I didn't want to leave home because my mother and dad were having a hard time about losing Philip. As I was also, you know, and I needed to be there. And so it was a couple years after I graduated that I entered. And I asked my mother if she would tell my dad. I was a little hesitant about telling him. No, it was his sister was Marie Bernadette.
Got it. Okay.
And I knew that he could understand somebody becoming a priest, but not a nun, you know.
Interesting.
But he didn't give me any problems. My mother told him, and he just said one thing to me: if you ever decide that you want to come home, make sure that you come. That would be just fine. And that's all he had to say to me. So anyway, I entered the convent.
So you entered the Adrian Dominicans, but yet you did have some connection with the IHMs.
Well, just that.
Just the catechism, the First Communion.
Yeah. So anyway, well, the one thing about the Dominicans, I knew that most of them were teachers. And I liked that idea.
Yes, you do, and did, and are.
And so, anyway, I entered, and my postulancy and my being a novice was good experiences for me, and I became good friends of the people girls that were in my group. Pat McCarty and I have been friends ever since we were postulants. And she's probably the one that stands out more for me than the others.
Very significant in your
Yeah.
life.
And so I made profession, and the first place I went was Our Lady of Sorrows in Farmington. And I was going to be teaching first grade. I had 65 children in my class, as you know, those were big years.
Yes,
And but I was lucky to have Joan Delaplane as my teaching partner. And however, she had never taught first grade. She always taught in, somewhere up in the upper grades. And so she had a sister, Marion, I think is, who lived, she was teaching at St. Scholastica's, I believe. And so we went over there on Saturdays. And she would teach us where we should be with our first group, and where we should be with our second, and where we should be with our third. And she would say to us, now when you come back next week, I want you to have covered this amount of work with your first group and all the other groups. And we did that for about maybe 3 times. And of course, Joan could teach me how to, keep my 65 kids in their seats. and so it wasn't all that bad. And I stayed there for 3 years. And we had 22 nuns living there. And Sister Isidem was our superior. And I became very good friends to some of the sisters. Thomas Leo was a very good friend of mine, or is a very good friend. And she probably was the closest, because she was teaching 3rd grade, and she also could help me. And the other one that I had help from, and I can't overlook what she did. Her name was Sister Cabrini Barton, and she came up from, I believe, Texas or Arizona, one of those states, and she had, I think it was bone cancer, and she came and lived there we used to get people sometimes that would come and live there with us that wasn't really well, because we were all on one floor. We had no stairs to climb. And anyway, she was what they used to call baby teachers.
Correct.
I used to hate that term.
Right, but that's what they called us.
Yeah, and I didn't like it when the kids heard that, because they didn't think they were babies anymore. But anyway, she was a baby teacher. And so on days that she felt well enough, in the beginning, she would come and sit in the back of my classroom and stay as long as that she was comfortable staying. And then after school, I would go to her room and she would tell me all the good things that I was doing. And then she would say to me, now that little boy in the first row over by the windows, you need to move him close to you. Bring him up to the front where he will pay attention better. And she would tell me some of the things that I could improve on not necessarily on the material, but just how I could take care of that many children and keep them busy or whatever we did, And so that I just had so much help. And we used to go to these other schools where people, brought the kids in and they'd teach in front of us, and I just was so grateful for all the help I got. And anyway, it was while I was there that my father was murdered down on the Easter Market. And that was something that it's unbelievable what you do go through when that happens, because it never comes to an end because of all the things that have to happen after the funeral, like the hearing and the trial, if you have one, picking up the Detroit paper, and I remember when it was right on the front page, or then you'd open up the paper one day and there'd be a little thing in there about it, and you just never you couldn't start to grieve.
What year was this, Phyllis? What year?
That was in 1958.
Okay.
Yeah. And so my mother was wonderful, with us. I remember her saying to all of us one day, we are not going to go through a trial. It's not going to bring Dad back, she said, and we're going to spend our energy as a family grieving for him, and let the prosecution or the whatever decide how this man is going to be punished for what has been done. And I look back at that and I think, thank God she did that, because it was, even though we got reminded about what was going on, it gave us some time to start to grieve. And so anyway, at the end of that year, that happened in March, and at the end of the year, I was changed to Our Lady of Sorrows in Detroit, which was right next to the Easter Market.
Oh, you were at Lady of Our Sorrows in Farmington, then you went to Detroit.
Yes.
I was seeing that twice in there. I thought, interesting.
Yeah. And when Mother Gerald would have had some council people, and they would come out and see us and talk to all of us once a year. And I can't remember her name, but she came and she says, "Does Mother Gerald know where you're at?" And I said, well, I think she does, you know. And she said to me, I'm going to bring this attention to Mother Gerald because I don't think she would ever want you to be here. And so at the end of the year, I was changed to Queen of Martyrs.
Oh,
I couldn't get away from the Blessed Mother here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Queen of Martyrs in Florida.
right. I see
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember calling my mother and thinking she might be a little disturbed about that, but she said, "I'm so glad you're going there."
Oh, good.
Yeah, and so anyway, I lived in Our Lady in Florida. Mary Joseph was our superior, and I lived with some wonderful nuns. One who became a good friend of mine was Helen Kelly.
Gloria.
Gloria Kelly.
Gloria.
Yeah, Gloria
I was trying
Kelly.
to think of
Thanks.
I know her as Gloria.
Yeah. And so anyway, then after that, I taught second grade because of course there wasn't a first grade. They didn't handle first grade in the school at that time.
If we could just stop for a second. You are an educator par excellence, and you've had tremendous experience and leadership roles. Are there a couple? You certainly had your beginnings were very challenging for you personally, but as far as your ministry, are there a couple that you would say just highlighted your career, or you just enjoyed the most, or you grew the most, or because we can't go through every one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the things that I am quite I don't want to say proud because I don't like that word, but I did have the opportunity to open up a school here in Adrian for the academy, and of course that started with first grade. I never could get out of first grade. You know, it was like you were just stuck there. And people used to say, well, that's because you do a good job. Well, I suppose that was true. And I have to say, I really enjoyed teaching young children.
How lucky those kids were. Right.
But anyway, so Loretta and I started the school over here. And I was there for 10 years. And when that school was, I felt, off the ground. And that was the hardest one that I thought to myself, I'm never going to get mixed up in starting a school again. So I left there, and they asked me to open up it was like a literacy center down in that, which was it was called the baby rooms, where some of the younger people at the academy sort of took over. And it's on first floor, and it's out toward the road. And we had we made 4 classrooms for some of these adults to come and have classes. And that was run by the county. And I can't remember who asked me if I would be willing to start that, but I did that for 1 year. And they didn't have a place of their own. They had some classes here and some classes all through the city here in Adrian. And anyway, I did that. And then at the end of that year, Helen Stone asked me if I would go down to Florida because Rosarian needed to start the primary grades down there. So she said, I just want you to go down and talk to the people about starting a school. So I went to Rosarian. I said to her, I can only go for 6 months. because Loretta's brother, who is a Holy Cross brother, and he was in Cleveland at Gilmore.
Oh, that's right.
Right. And they wanted to start a primary school there. And he approached Anthony and myself. They wanted to do exactly what was done here in Adrian. They wanted to start with a Montessori school and then the grade school. And so he had wanted us to come there and talk to their board people about our philosophy. Well, my philosophy was that we taught kids individually rather in groups for reading and math. And it's not that you never have them in groups, but you really take the children that need some special attention, and as individuals. And in first grade, that happens quite a bit, and in all the lower grades. And so that I had learned that type of teaching when I was working on my master's, and it came from England. We had a teacher from England that taught individualization.
Wow.
And I got very excited about that. It was something that was brand new. I think I was getting tired at the time of teaching, cat, mat, fat, really, because it was the same thing every year, and when you got into individualized working with these children, it was a whole new ball game. And so I started the school down in Rosarian, the first grade, the kindergarten and first grade down there for 6 months. I went down in the summertime and spent quite a time getting materials and lots of things. Anyway, then I went to Gilmore.
And you kept on.
And
with
Gilmore was the place that I just adored being there.
So that would be the place that perhaps was the most influential, although all the others helped you to get to that point.
Right.
So,
and I always had somebody, like Loretta helped me, worked with me here. Rosarian, there was no one. But at Gilmore, after being there for 6 months, preparing for this, Joan Christie came. I had taught with Joan Christie right here in Adrian. Knew she was a good teacher, but she was a 6th grade teacher. So if she was willing to come, I was not going to stay there by myself because it was too hard. I needed somebody else to work with. And
okay, Phyllis, I think we're going to have to schedule another time.
Oh,
with you.
no.
No, but I mean, I think your ministries, you are an educator, and you continue to teach all of us by your example and stuff. But what would we all be surprised about? What can you tell us, something about yourself that would be a surprise to us all?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm
briefly.
What?
Briefly. Yeah.
I don't know. Are you talking about what I like to do?
Yeah.
Well,
however you want to answer.
I'm a very staunch baseball fan with the Tigers.
Keep praying.
and I have done that. I have been that all my life.
Okay.
I like that very much. And I don't know.
You're a faithful friend too. I know
I
many
am.
of your friends. You are a very faithful friend.
I will admit that I am.
Yes.
Those that thing comes naturally to me. It's just I have girls that I mentored in my classroom. They'd come from the colleges where they had to do that first year or 6 months of viewing a classroom. I had many girls. I always had one. And
It was tremendous preaching that you have done for all those years.
yeah.
How would you like to be remembered?
oh, gosh, you know
In
that.
one short sentence.
I've never thought of that. Well, I'd like to be remembered as being a faithful friend. I think that's something that I recognize in myself because people have told me that. And I hope that over the years I was a person that was easy to live with. I don't know that for sure whether I was, but I think that I tried hard to do that. I'm a very faithful friend to my families.
Yes, yes.
You know, my nieces and nephews. I keep in touch with all of them.
I just remember your tender, loving care and support and unending, how a challenge that was with your sister, Margaret. And you
And
were
that's another whole story.
Yes, you were
Yeah.
so good to her.
Yeah.
But, you know, to try to get all your years of experience into 30 minutes is a challenge. But thank you so much for sharing what you have shared. And we can just continue the story with you when we see you,
Yeah.
Heather and Jan. We're delighted to have you here on campus. I'm so
Well,
glad
thank
you
you.
made that.
I'm
that
delighted
decision.
to be here.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
You bring happiness by your presence.
Yeah. Well, thank
You're
you.
just
Yeah.
very humble, very giving, very generous woman.
Well,
And
thank
thank you for that.